welcome to another companion piece of Ashland's Field of Dreams documentary. I have with me today David Carter, who was the writer, producer, director of the documentary. And today we want to talk a little bit about why the documentary was made and how it was made and all those kind of things. Dave, can you fill us in a little bit about that?
Well, the why. It was a chance meeting roughly 2 years ago at CP1. I was in Ashland for a couple days and I went by Central Park. It wasn't planned. I was drawn to it. I pulled in there. I wanted to go over to the shortstop area, kick the dust, and relive the times there. As I pulled in, Mark, I saw a guy named Gary Wright, who was also a shortstop, and I knew Gary from the time I was 12 years old, and baseball was our connection. So I says, gee, what are you doing here at Central Park? He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I came back to kick the dust at shortstop and relive it. He said, well, me too, kind of. And then he's told me the real story. Gary had just made a commitment to donate $125,000 to Central Park Rehab. He wanted to honor his father, who was also his coach, with the ultimate gift, to make that field first class and to build new dugouts, new press box, new backstop, and have the press box named after his dad. So that was the beginning of it. And once that happened, I saw what was going on, and I saw a need to get a internet virtual gathering place for us. So Gary lives about 2 hours away from me in Florida. We connected, and I said, let me do a website, because you've got some email addresses. And once I told him about the website idea, it was up in 2 days. And then he started sending out emails to all his friends, all the baseball guys he had on the list, saying, here's what we'd like to do. And send us your memory, send us your pictures. They came in, and as I read those, I saw this is much larger than simply a website. I saw a documentary, and that was the beginning.
You talk about the beginning, and can you kind of take us through some of the thought process that you went through to put this together?
I saw a very simple documentary. I saw talking heads, maybe some nice production values. But then something came into my mind. There's a piece of music called Talkin' Baseball. It's an 80s piece of music about baseball in the 50s. And I played that, and suddenly I was overtaken by the idea that I can make this a much, much, much better piece if I get some really good music in there and get Terry Cashman to do Let Us Have the Music.
The Whiz Kids had won it, Bobby Thompson had done it, and Yogi read the comics all the while. Rock and roll was being born, marijuana we would scorn. So down on the corner the national pastime went on trial. We're talking baseball, Klazuski, Campanella, talking baseball. The man and Bobby Fella, the Scooter, the Barber and the Nuke. They knew them all from Boston to Dubuque, especially Willie, Mickey and the Duke. Well, Casey was winning, Hank Aaron was beginning, one Robbie going out, one coming in. Kiner and Midget Goodell, the Thumper and Mel Parnell, and Ike was the only one winning down in Washington. I'm talking baseball, Klazuski, Campanella, talking baseball. The man and Bobby Fella, the Scooter, the Barber and the Duke. They knew them all from Boston to Dubuque, especially Willie, Mickey and the Duke. Now my old friend, the bachelor, well, he swore he was the Oklahoma kid, and Cookie played hooky to go and see the Duke. And me, I always loved Willie May. Those were the days. Mickey and the Duke. Say hey, say hey, say hey. It was Willie, talking Willie, Mickey and the Duke. Say hey, say hey, say hey, Willie, Mickey and the Duke. Say hey, say hey, say hey, say Willie, Mickey and the Duke.
Dave, can we talk a little bit about how you wanted to make this documentary a little different?
Well, you just saw the Talking Baseball piece, and you see some recreation of game action from the 50s in there that didn't exist. You know, we made some of these things. And so the next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to have a memories of a man looking back at his baseball past. So I narrated the piece. In the end, did it myself because I had the emotion for it. But then I shot actual, what appears to be game footage from the 50s. I got old uniforms, new old uniforms, had them lettered with the right teams, found equipment like this on eBay, put things together, and then with these narrations of a man's baseball past, I was able to shoot footage that matched perfectly with the dialogue that was on screen.
I love baseball.
The 1950s. That was a simpler time in America. For many young people, transportation meant your bike or the bus. It was a time when there were 2 TV channels, maybe 3, but only if your antenna was aimed just right. And it was a time for most boys when summer meant baseball.
I made a journey back in time to a place where the boy who still lives inside me once played baseball. I heard the talk of summer days and wooden bats and flannel uniforms, and I realized that we are all still boys. The first foreign language I learned was baseball. I was 8 the first time I played. I stood at the plate holding a huge Louisville slugger. "Hold the grain up," somebody hollered, "and choke up on the bat." Then somebody shouted, "There are ducks on the pond, and don't put your foot in the bucket." The first pitch came and I closed my eyes and swung and heard somebody say Texas Leaguer as I ran to first base. Then my coach said, "Oh no, shoestring catch." As I sat on the sidelines, I heard 0 for 1. Then as our team took the field, someone said, "Hey kid, you're the hind catcher." I had no idea what they were talking about, any of it. But I soon learned to speak the language of baseball fluently.
Okay, it's a payoff pitch. Give him a roundhouse.
My first hero was never on a baseball card. He never played at Crosley Field or Ebbets Field. I never saw him on our black and white TV. My first hero, I can still hear his voice as he would say to me, "Let's go throw some." I'm attracted to sporting goods stores, the way some men are attracted to hardware stores. There's something about baseball gloves and spikes that turns me into a kid again. When I smell glove leather, I see my first glove, and I can tell you exactly where I was when I got it. And as I recall my first real baseball spikes, steel spikes, I remember how that was a coming-of-age moment for me. The only comparable feeling was getting my driver's license a few years later. And guess where I drove on my first solo trip? To the big ballpark with my glove and spikes in the back seat.
Dave, I think we can see where the simulated footage just seemed to bring this thing to life and put a lot more into it than just a talking head, as you were talking about earlier.
As I kept doing this and added more to it, I saw the potential. Once I got the music from Ryan Parker that was so powerful, the Seems Like Yesterday piece that he did, that became the ending for the documentary. So once I had that music, the next thing that I did was I was able to shoot things just for that. And the entire piece is a man looking back at his baseball past. He is there, and in the segment, the 4-minute ending, he's in color, the man my age looking back at his baseball youth. And he is visiting his past, which is the black and white shots. And as he is seeing the boy in action, the boy obviously is him. But this is really great storytelling, I think, visually, by having the man at the park, and he is seeing the things he's thinking about in his baseball youth.
Yeah, I think we saw that a lot at our CP1 reunion, the first reunion they had in August and last August. And I think we're as we look at this film, we see how real it is to people.
Young, I rode my bike down to the park. I'd stay there watching baseball until dark. I'd play games behind the dugout with my friends. We'd run those pop can bases, just trying to pretend that it was us on that field, looking bigger than we were. Was it all that we dreamed and everything we'd heard? Playing baseball on that big old field of dreams seemed 100 years away.
One more out.
But now I'm looking back amazed at how it seems. Playing just like yesterday. 5 years later, I can still recall the day when I first walked out onto that big field to play, with my dad giving signs as he was tugging at his feet.
Go!
I didn't know if I'd come through, but he sure believed, 'cause it was me on that field, stepping slowly to the plate, with his words in my head, saying, son, don't swing too late. Playing baseball on that big old field of dreams seemed 100 years away. Playing there was just like yesterday. We were young and we were free, loving the camaraderie, learning how to lose and win, and how to go from boys to men. Now I stand up in the batter's box again. Look around the big field as I try to take it in. I remember how I ran around with ease, as I walk around the bases and relive the memories of those who played on that field, where I learned about the game as another generation prepares to do the same. just like yesterday.
Discover your promise, your talents, your abilities, yourself at Ohio University Southern in Ironton and Proctorville, with associate and bachelor degree programs that prepare you for your future. Ohio University Southern.
Dave, I think the documentary does a great job of putting people back into the 1950s, and a lot of that obviously has to be reproduced and recreated by yourself. And can you talk about some of the things beyond what we've already seen about what you had to do to be able to do that?
We got a dozen 50s cars in the park, for starters. Then we had kids wearing 50s clothing and wearing 50s uniforms and gloves and stuff. So we used that. But in addition to that, Mark, what we did, I was able to go to the Marshall University Channel 3 archives and got actual old news footage. Downtown Ashland, things in the park from the mid to late 1950s. So I really blended the old car footage and the boys playing baseball in the park, which I just shot recently, with actual news footage from Channel 3.
What was Ashland like in the 1950s? 2 words: simple pleasures. Downtown parades, Halloween parties, city pool, soapbox derby, Paramount Theater, Boy Scouts, Sunday church.
I did an interview with one of our guys, a catcher named Selby Litton, who told a story that I thought was very funny, but it would be much better if we illustrated it with an actual recreation of the event. So the catcher's mask stuff we shot was done after the interview.
As I recall, our Babe Ruth League was pretty competitive. One of the things I do recall was the opposing batters would hand me my catcher's mask after I'd flipped it off going after a passed ball or a foul ball or something like that. They usually have a big grin on their face as they hand me my catcher's mask. The reason for that big smile was the fact that they'd rubbed that catcher's mask in the dirt, in the sand. And I could feel all that sand and grit on my faces. Eventually I learned, it took me a while, to go ahead and whack that catcher's mask against my shin pads and rub it down my thigh a couple of times before I put it on. That's the way it was in our Babe Ruth League.
I had an interview with a pitcher named Carl Kegler that as he spoke, I had goosebumps. He was talking about an experience that he had of going back to Central Park. And as he talked, I knew that I had to do something really special with the video on this. So what I'm going to show you is the original interview first that we had. And then after you've seen the words he had to begin with, we'll come back and I'll show you how I treated the visuals to give it a much more powerful emotional effect.
Had not been back for, 40 years, I guess. Hadn't been on the mound since '63. And went to Central Park, and of course we're all drawn toward the big diamond, and went out, actually stood on the mound, and reflected back, and then I looked over and said goodbye to Frank Wagner, who was our first baseman, who's now passed on. Said goodbye to Bob Yancey, who's passed on. Said hi to Nick Jordan, my catcher.
Well, Mark, the way I created that, once I had the idea, I used the green screen technique, and I'm going to show you the green screen shots that were used so you can get the feel for what that looked like by itself.
Had not been back for, 40 years, I guess. Hadn't been on the mound since '63. And went to Central Park, and of course we're all drawn toward the big diamond, and went out, actually stood on the mound, and reflected back, and then I looked over and said goodbye to Frank Wagner, who was our first baseman, who's now passed on. Said goodbye to Bob Yancey, who's passed on. Said hi to Nick Jordan, my catcher, and Regenus. Daniels, Chipper Miller, and all the guys that I'd played with, and just thought back about the wonderful memories, just being part of a great team. It was just really special.
Dave, there's a lot of powerful emotion throughout this documentary, but probably the one thing that stands out is the interview with the Ashland baseball player at the end of the documentary. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, last summer at the reunion, Mark, I did interviews, and I interviewed H.F. Dixon, a very, very good hitter who was a center fielder for the Tomcats, and he was very emotional about what baseball as a kid meant to him. And that very moment, when I got through with the interview, I knew he was my ending, and I knew I had to do something special with it. And what I was able to do, I was able to get the Ashland Tomcat baseball team to be in Tomcat uniforms, and I actually got a shot that looks like the opening game when he was announced as the Tomcat center fielder. You see black and white shots of him going on the field and his name with the PA system.
Well, it all started as an 11-year-old in this park, playing for Ballard's TV on CP2. I was always in awe of big boys that played on Diamond number 1, hoping someday that I could be there. And I worked hard as a youngster with my teaching of my father and his support. And one day I finally made it here. And the day that I stepped on this diamond as a sophomore playing for the Ashland Tomcats was
sophomore H.F. Dixon.
One of the proudest moments in my life.
There's a lot of powerful segments that are included in this documentary, and one of them that really comes to mind is the one I think you called The Boy. And there was some great writing that went into that, and I know, you know, sometimes these things come to you in the middle of the night, and I know as a writer I've had that happen to me as well. Can you talk about that and what was written and how that segment came to be?
It was like in the middle of the night, past midnight. I woke up, because the documentaries consumed me. I woke up about a thought of me going back to the ballpark, me alone, and seeing a boy there, and seeing this boy fielding and hitting and running the bases. And he was a blur, and I had the image of what he was going to look like. And in the end, the boy, of course, was me. And the piece that I wrote and produced is, to me, the most powerful emotional piece in the entire documentary. Let's take a look at that. I went back to the big ball field, just me. No one else was around. And then I saw a boy there, but the boy did not see me. Quietly, I watched from a distance as the boy flawlessly fielded ground balls. And then he stepped to the plate and hit a ball in the gap. And he ran the bases with speed I can only imagine today. As the boy stood on second base dusting off his pants, I dared go closer, and I finally saw the boy's face. And then I realized that the boy was me.
Dave, I know a lot of time and effort has gone into the making of this documentary. I know it's been 2 years that you've pretty much consumed your life with doing that, and I think the end product you had to be very pleased with the end product.
The original thought was do a simple talking head documentary. The end piece, as we have now seen it completely, is my ultimate project. It's about baseball. It's about the 50s. It's about Ashland. And as I've told you before, I didn't have to research this documentary. I lived it. And being so emotionally involved with it, it's about baseball. It's about our youth. It's about all of us guys who ever played baseball at a place we loved. And for that reason, this is the ultimate project. I'll never have as much fun doing any project again.
I think it connects with people on so many levels, and it truly is a universal story. Sure, it is about it is about Ashland's Central Park, and that was our field of dreams, and for many of us that have lived here. But it really is a story that anybody could relate to, and I think anybody who watches this will enjoy seeing the emotions that pour out of this thing, and they can relate to what's happening. And I'm proud to have been a part of it and work with you.
Thanks for all you've done, Mark.